it does not matter whether you're talking about boxing, basketball, football, rugby, Ultimate Fighting Championship, Texas Hold'em, poker, cricket, anything. It makes no difference, NASCAR racing. It doesn't matter what sport you are talking about. The ultimate goal, one of the first things, we hear this all the time, in basketball season, we're in here right now, and we always talk about basketball teams doing what? That they want to control the pace, they want to control the tempo, or they want to take certain shots away from the opponents, from the other team. And the fact is that, whenever you're in, and it's not even just sports, it shows up in diplomacy, in negotiations, and even in warfare. The fact is that one of the greatest victories that you can win is to get your opponent to fight the battle on your terms. I remember when I was running track in high school, Coach Congo, he was our track coach, and he would always tell them, make them run your race. And it always kind of sounds weird, but it is, football teams, what do you hear during football? They're controlling the line of scrimmage. They are imposing their will upon the other team. The fact is that if you can find a way to make your opponent or whoever it is to fight or to play on your terms, you have a decided advantage, okay? And so that's why it is so important. And I think there was a great example of it, and I'm curious, does anybody know where my sermon title came from? If you do, if you know where it came from, you just gotta, come on, right? Thank goodness that Evelyn's over here, and she's our only boxing aficionado in the room. A great example of this concept was infamous Muhammad Ali. Now, if everybody remembers, Muhammad Ali was known for being very loud, being very brash. He was always always talking loud. He was always showing loud. But when he fought, he had a tactic. Didn't utilize it every time, but he had a tactic that he made famous that was called the rope-a-dope. And what the rope-a-dope was, that he would attempt to lure his opponent to follow him back against the ropes. And then when he would get them, when they would get him up against the ropes, he would sit there and he would endure. And honestly, one of the things that made this work because other people tried it, and for others it did not work nearly as well. It worked for Muhammad Ali because, number one, he was great at dodging blows. He was really good at, even though he could take a lot of punishment, did not have a glass jaw. So he could take a good amount of punishment, but he was also able to kind of deflect it and not let not let punches hit as hard as they hoped that they would. And so then, when it was all said and done, so they would try to beat on him for a little bit, and then when their arms got tired, then Muhammad Ali would step away and he would then counterpunch. He was a great counterpuncher, but he also was fast, and he would display his quickness and his punching ability, and that's how he won many of his fights. But the thing is, you had to follow him into the ropes for that to work. Some did, some didn't. And so but it was called the rope-a-dope, is where the term came from. And so you may wonder where in the world I got a message on that. We are going to be in a passage today, and I'm going to have you guys, I'm not going to tell you where we're going to be I'm not going to tell you the story we're going to tell until you go find it, okay? And so we're going to have an experiment here to see who gets there first, not on a phone or tablet. Okay, you get it on your paper, Russell. We're going to be 1 Samuel, okay? 1 Samuel 17. Now, if you don't know what that is, 1 Samuel is the 9th book of the Bible, okay? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel is how it goes. So 9th book of the Bible, we're going to be 1 Samuel chapter 17. When somebody turns there and you know what story we're telling, you got to raise your hand and shout it out.
David and Goliath.
There we go, David and Goliath. Now, I say this, and the reason that this story is kind of cool is chances are, even if you haven't heard the account of David and Goliath, like in church, if you haven't been told the story, I will guarantee you that at some point or another you have heard David and Goliath mentioned whether it's in business, whether it's in sports, whether it's in personal relationships. It's funny how something that comes out of the Bible has invaded every aspect of our culture. You always hear that. Oh, this is the typical David versus Goliath moment, or this is, we always hear it. Okay? So, what we're going to be doing is we're going to kind of read through it, but I want you to do me a favor. Please don't jump to the end. Everybody wants to jump to the end of the story. And the fact is that what we're really going to be looking at and studying today probably has less to do with what David did than it does what he didn't do. Okay? And so, we're going to, I'll kind of set the stage here a little bit. When this happened, kind of so everybody understands where we are. At this point in history, in Israelite history, Saul was the king. King Saul was the king. Saul did some things that God frowned upon. As a result, the kingdom was to be taken away from Saul. And so God sent Samuel, his prophet, to go and to anoint this young man by the name of David, who would be the next king. Happened when he was probably about 15 years old. And so at this point, Saul is the king, but David has been anointed as king, and so he will be. And at this period in history now, David is probably about 16, is what we figure when this happened. The arch enemy of the Israelites were the Philistines. Okay, we've all heard of the Philistines. And so the account we're looking at takes place during one of their battles. It was during one of their wars. And what would happen is that they would gather in a valley where they were going to wait. They were going to battle and fight inside the valley. And so the Israelites would be camped on the hills on one side of the valley. The Philistines would be camped on the hills on the other side of the valley. You get this huge space that is in between them, and that's where the battle would take place. Okay? So this is what's going on. They're standing there one day as they're gathered for battle. This man, and I say man because he was male. That's the only thing he had like a man. Goliath comes out. The Bible says that Goliath was a giant. He was a monster. Depending on how you rate the cubit, there's the Egyptian cubit runs, I think they say about 21 inches. It's measured from your elbow to the tip of your finger. And they used to call it at 21 inches, though generally the Israelite cubit, and what most of you see, was probably 18 inches. So when it describes him, he was 6 cubits and a span. So Goliath was over 9 feet tall. Okay? Over 9 feet tall. Now, we don't know what kind of shape he was in. We don't know if he was, if he was a buff dude, but we know that he was a champion warrior. And you don't get to be a champion warrior in hand-to-hand combat without being pretty sizable, pretty formidable, and being in good shape. We do know what he carried into battle, this gives you a little bit of an idea. His helmet alone, the helmet that he wore into battle, weighed at least 30 pounds. Okay? He wore what they call a scale coat of armor. It would have been like a large, oversized t-shirt, and it was made out of metal scales. Weighed over 150 pounds. Okay? His spear that he carried, in addition to his sword, but the spear alone probably weighed 30 to 35 pounds. So that's what this guy carried into battle. Okay? Definitely not your average Joe. And so there's a reason that everybody was scared to death of him. He comes out, and he would come down into the valley, and he would taunt the Israelites. And basically the taunt was, hey, send one of your guys out. Send your best soldier out here to fight me. And so you fight me, and whoever wins, then their army wins. And so, if you win, you beat me, then our entire army will surrender to you, which, by the way, was a lie, but it's what he told them anyway. And he says, if you beat me, then the entire army, the Philistine army, will surrender to you and will be your slaves. But now, if I beat you, then your entire army is going to surrender to us and will be our slaves. And so he would come out once in the morning and again at night, and he would face the entire Israelite army and taunt them and make this dare. And you wonder how long would it take, for somebody to go, I'm getting tired of this. We're going to do something about it. It went on for 40 days, and no one ever stepped onto the battlefield. Twice a day, and no one ever stepped onto the battlefield. Even though King Saul issued a reward, a bounty, whatever you want to call it, he said, whoever goes out there and fights him and defeats him, I am going to give them great wealth. I am going to give them my daughter's hand in marriage, which would have made them royalty and in line to the throne. And I am going to exempt their father's family, in other words, their family and then everybody beyond them, from paying any taxes in Israel. So this was a huge reward that he was offering, yet we're still 40 days in, 2 times a day, and nobody has marched down into the valley to take on Goliath. They're scared to death. Now, the account that we're reading now, one day Jesse sends his son David, and he sends David up to take supplies and to the commander of the army, but also to take supplies to his brothers to go see how they're doing. And so his brothers are fighting. They're up here, well, they're standing in line and listening to Goliath yell things at them just like everybody else is. But they are part of the army. And so David takes stuff up there. He drops off his stuff to the commander of the army. Then he wants to go and see his brothers. So he goes up to the battle line, goes up to the front lines. And while he is there, Goliath comes out and makes his daily taunt of defiance and dishonor. And so David hears it. Okay? And David is mad. And I think he's probably mad at 2 different groups of people. I think he's mad at Goliath for him saying this. But the second thing is, I think he's probably mad and frustrated at the fact that here's the entire Israelite army, including his brothers, and they won't go do anything about it. They're going to let this guy talk that way about God. They're going to let this guy talk that way about the Israelites. And they've allowed it. So he starts asking about it. And they tell him, well, this is what's going to happen for the guy that goes down and fights him. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to go. Well, here's where I want to kind of pick up. Because I think that inside this story, there's some great things that you and I can learn and can take from all of this. And the reason I say that is because I know that you and I may not face any giants named Goliath, but the fact is that we face giants we face things that feel like giants every day, don't we? And we may not carry spears and shields and be standing on the side of the valley, but the fact is that we face battles every single day. And we find ourselves in those positions. And this is why I said, and really, as I look at this message, what you need to understand is that the enemy's greatest accomplishment is convincing us to fight the battle on his terms. The enemy's greatest accomplishment is convincing me to fight the battle on his terms. And that's the thing that David does not do. And so, as we're looking here, like I said, there's a lot that we can learn. It starts really early. David says, well, by golly, you don't have to worry about this Philistine. I'm going to solve the problem today. Well, so the first person that says something is who? It's his oldest brother, Eliab. And so in chapter 17, verse 28, says, when Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, in other words, asking what's going to be done, for the man who goes out and fights this guy, he burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the desert? A little sarcasm, maybe? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. And just as Eliab did to David, you are going to have people that are going to question your motives about the things that you choose to do. There are people that are going to doubt you. David was called a man after God's own heart. Did he have issues? Yes. Did he make mistakes? Yes. But to call him conceited and wicked at heart is just absolutely untrue. That's not who he was. I really think that Eliab was, number one, I think he was feeling guilty. I think his outburst in a lot of ways was coming out of guilt of the fact that he hadn't done anything, and here is his little brother who's not even part of the army, that wants to go out and handle this problem, this situation. David was not trying to interject himself into the situation. He wasn't. He wasn't trying to steal the spotlight. He felt like he needed to do something that nobody else would do. He needed to do something that had to be done. Okay? And I say that because there are times when you're going to feel like you need to go in a certain direction. There's times when you're going to take an unpopular stand, when you're going to have to make a decision. And the fact is that there are going to be people that are going to question your motives. They're going to question your motivation, the reasons that you're doing it. And I think we need to be just like David in the fact of not, David didn't listen to the haters. He knew, and here's the deal. You and God are the only ones that know if your heart's in the right place. You're the only ones that know. And, I was thinking about this. You talk about, we're sitting here on Mother's Day talking about mothers, and I know that there are times when there are mothers that choose to stay home, there are mothers that choose to go to work, there are mothers that are single mothers, there are mothers that are raising their kids certain ways, and they're putting them in private school, they're putting them in public school, they're putting them in Christian school, they're doing all of these different things, and people will always question your motives and say, well, you oughta, and you really should have. And what I'm telling you is that I think you and God know the motives of your heart, and you know the reason that you're doing things the way you are and how you are. And you need to understand that you are doing a great work, and you need to stick with it. And you need to not listen to those that don't understand, that don't know. And you need to follow what you believe God is leading you and prompting you to do when it comes to raising your kids and loving your family. Okay? There are times when we have to make choices that seem unpopular. But Colossians 3:23 says that whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for men. You and I are not here to impress man. We are not here to impress people. We're not here to win their approval or their praise. We are here to bring glory to God. We are here to do what makes Him smile. People can question my motives all they want. But on the day I die, the first words I want to hear are, well done, good and faithful servant. And that's good enough for me. So, and I think the thing is, we live in a society that's it's all about promoting ourselves. It's all about, drawing the attention to me and what others think about me. But God says, don't get sucked into that lie. Don't get sucked in. There is an audience of one. And He is the only one whose opinion matters. And so we need to, in everything that we do, strive to please Him. Like I said, David, he ignores the haters. He moves past. And it was going to do him no good. By the way, how much good would it have done him to try and convince Eliab that he was doing this for the right reason with the right motive? None. So that's why he didn't even try to explain it. He just moved on. I'm doing it because I know I'm right. And immediately, so we got Eliab is questioning his motives, and then what does he do? King Saul, the next one, questions his abilities. And so right off there he goes to the king in verse 33. He says, you are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a boy. And he has been a fighting man from his youth. And when I read that, I was thinking, 1 Timothy 4:12 says, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech and life and love and faith and in purity. And we're not talking about just, physical youth. You may be young as a Christian. You may be a new baby Christian. Or you may be, you may not be new to church. You may not be as experienced as others are when it comes to church stuff. Or you may have been a Christian for a long time, but you're new at this time of really trying to surrender your life and to follow God's will in the decisions that you make and the things that you do. And all I'm saying is that when you're going to have people that are going to say, oh, you can't do that. You can, no. You're not as experienced as you should be. Here's the deal. David was 16. He'd never been in the army before. He'd never been in the army before. But the fact is that God had prepared him for this moment. You know, we sit and we always see the phrase, you've probably seen it on Facebook 10,000 times, and if you haven't, you will. You know, but that God does not call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And that is so true in the fact that David may not have been classically trained in warfare and in battle, but God had been preparing him for this battle. You may not be classically trained in ministry. You may not have studied as long as somebody else. You may not have done all of this stuff and know all of these things. But I do believe that God has been preparing and training you for the arena of ministry that he has for you. And you need to trust in that and trust in God and his ability and set an example for everyone else. In your speech, in your life, in your love, in your faith, and in your purity. Like I said, David had been, David hadn't fought in battle, but he had fought lions and bears. And killed them when they came for the sheep. Okay? Yeah, he hadn't fought in battle with the spear, but he was definitely well prepared for what he was going up against. And then there's this little twist. I love this. In verse 37, Saul says to David, he says, "Go, and the Lord be with you. But by the way, put on my armor." And I always kind of like that. It's like, oh, go, and God will be with you. But you're going to need this. And so what does David do? He tries it on. It obviously doesn't fit. And he says, no. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I am going. He does not carry any of his battle gear. Instead, he grabs 5 stones and he takes his sling and he heads where? He heads out to the battlefield. And I was thinking, David hasn't even faced his opponent yet, and he's already been called wicked. He's been called conceited. He has been told that he's only a boy, that he doesn't stand a chance, that he does. And he hasn't even faced Goliath yet. Hasn't even gotten to his opponent yet, and has been called all kinds of things. So, but he steps out onto and you need to kind of envision this a little bit. I think we always see him standing right there together. This would have been a big valley. This would have been a large valley. And so, as they're going, but at the same time, with it being a large valley, I imagine just as well, if you've ever been somewhere and you're down in a canyon, voices carry so well. You've got hills all the way around, and so you can talk and you hear this going on. And so David steps down into this valley. You imagine that as he's going in, he has got this giant standing in front of him who has nothing but bad intentions. Behind him, he's got the entire Israelite army who are just shaking in their boots. They're scared of this guy. They are intimidated by Goliath. The entire army is intimidated by Goliath. And I mean, that is one of the things that, see, I think our enemy, I think the devil, he wants to do to us so many times. He wants to scare us. He wants to intimidate us. He wants to sit there and tell us that you can't win, that you don't stand a chance, that oh, no, you might as well give it up. But I think that's what we need to cling to, the same promise that David did, because in verse 46, David says to Goliath, "This day the Lord will hand you over to me." See, David knew it wasn't his battle. David knew that he wasn't the one who was going to win the battle. He knew that he wasn't going to win it on his own. It wasn't going to be in his strength. One of the reasons David was not intimidated by Goliath, because he knew that his God was bigger than Goliath. Because David knew what we need to cling to, and that is the truth that greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. But when we go into battle, I mean, like I said, the enemy wants to convince you that to fight on his terms, to fight it alone, to stick it out on your own. Muhammad Ali, there was a great example, and when he fought George Foreman was interviewed afterwards, and he was one of them that Ali used the rope-a-dope, that he was pulling him in and he was taking punches. And George Foreman was giving it everything he had. I mean, he was doing everything he could to, because that's kind of what Ali would do, is he'd pull you in and you would think that you're winning. You felt like, oh, you're following him in because he's on the ropes. We always hear that phrase, don't we? Oh, got him on the ropes. Got him on the ropes. And so you chase him in. And man, you really start throwing punches. You're dumping everything you can because you think you're winning, but you're not. And he's absorbing everything that you got until your arms are too tired, until you can't go, until you're not focused at all. And then he would turn. But when he was fighting Foreman, Foreman was given everything he had. And if you go back and you watch the fights, Foreman was doing some damage. He was hitting him hard. He had some big old fist, and was hitting him hard. But Ali, whenever they would get into the clinches, would always say, "That all you got, George? That all you got, George? Is that all you got, George?" And he said it got in his head. It demoralized. He started trying to punch harder. He started swinging wilder and wore himself out quicker. And then Ali stepped away from the ropes and picked him apart. And I think that's what the devil does to us so many times. I don't know how many, anybody in the room hearing that voice right now, that all you got? That all you got? Because I think we do. We get convinced that we're going to fight this on our own. And that's the reason I said we can't fight his fight, no matter how much he tries to lure us in, no matter how much he tries to draw us in to fighting the battle his way. We need to understand that that's not how God made us. We need to fight, when we go in all on our own, and we fight in our own power, and that's what David didn't do. But we are told that we are given the armor. We have the helmet, okay, of truth. We have, or with the belt of truth, excuse me. Okay, we have the breastplate of righteousness, the helmet of salvation. We wield the sword of the Spirit and the shield of faith. God has given us everything that we need. The problem, though, is that when we try to go in on our own power, when we try to fight in our own feeble strength, and that is when we are demoralized. That's when that word, "is that all you got?" It does wear us out. Because here's the deal. The devil is going to try to attack you, and he's going to try to come after you when you're tired. He's going to come after you when you're lonely. He's going to come after you when you're depressed. He's going to come after you when you are dejected. That's when he's going to come after you. And so we've got to be so careful that it's not in our efforts, because we don't have what it takes. That's the reason James tells us in chapter 4. He says to submit then to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. We resist the devil by drawing near to God. We resist the devil by submitting to the Lord, by trusting that it is his strength, not our strength. That it is his armor, not our armor, that is going to win the battle. And when we do that, we're not intimidated. Those are the times that we know it's not us. We get intimidated because we think we're going to fight in our power. Because we think that somehow we're going to wage this battle. And then we realize that I can't. And we lose a skirmish, we get hit hard, and we get scared. And what we end up doing is, instead of running to God, we allow the emotion to take over. And we get scared, and we get intimidated, and we get afraid, and we get paralyzed. Goliath intimidated an entire army by what he said, by the way he looked. But he didn't intimidate David. And he didn't intimidate David because David knew that he wasn't going to win this battle on his own. He knew that it wasn't in his strength that he was even going out onto the battlefield. He knew that it was only because of God that he was going to win it. David knew that his strength, that his value. I mean, look at all the things that Goliath called him, man. He called him a dog. He tried to appeal to his ego. He appealed to his pride. He tried to make him emotional, mad, angry, everything else. But David knew that his value, David knew that his strength, David knew that his victory came from, not from what was seen of those rocks and that sling, but from the one who was unseen. He knew that his power came from Almighty God. I think of the song, I know who goes before me, I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever, he's a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. We never, ever, ever fight alone. We never do. But the other thing we have to be so sure of is that we don't fight in his time. Now I think of this visual of Goliath. You know, he's walking across, and David is coming in, but we don't see David running until verse 48 when he says that he rushed in when the time was right. Okay? And I'm not saying that we sit back, but I think that so many times, you know, we try to rush into the battle, and it's not God's time. It is the enemy's time. They try to convince us that that's where we need to be. Read the Bible, and you know what you're going to find time and time and time and time and time and time and time again? Is example after example after example after example of the fact that God's timing is perfect. It is always perfect. And this is where it all comes back, that the greatest accomplishment the enemy can have is to convince us that we need to fight the battle on his terms. He convinces us that we need to fight the battle on his time. And God says, no, 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 no. No, my time is perfect, and you wait. And I know that's tough sometimes. It's hard to wait, isn't it? It's hard to sit back and let things be said about you and let things be said to you. It's hard sometimes to sit back and watch things go on. But we need to trust in God and the fact that he's going to reveal to us when the time is right that we are to move, to go. That's what we have to, and that is where it is waiting for God's time instead of our time. Not being sucked in, not being lured in by the enemy into the rope-a-dope of thinking, oh yeah, I'm vulnerable now, come on, come and get me, and finding out that we're in a battle we don't want to be in, that we're unprepared. And I'm not saying that we sit back, I'm not saying that we never ever do anything. What I'm saying is that when we understand that we're not fighting this in our strength, that we need his strength, that when we understand that and we come to realize that it is God's time, not our time, that is when we will be able to wage the battle. That's when we're going to be more like David. And we're going to have a time of decision, and I want to kind of do this a little bit differently. I know that we're sitting here, and now don't go yet, David. There was one more there. You got to go back. I know that a lot of times we sit here and we're kind of like, well, okay, that's a great story, and that's wonderful, and that's cool about David, and I didn't know how tall Goliath was, and that's an amazing thing, but how in the world do I apply this in my life? What in the world is that going to look like for me tomorrow? What is that going to look like for me down the road? You're telling me to wage my battles, not to get lured into the way the enemy wants to fight my battles. What does that look like for me? And I want to give you some real, hopefully, some real world thoughts. And this is what I want you to do, okay? Is you got 4 questions up there, and they are in your bulletin. They're on the back page of the sermon notes, okay? They are on the back page of the sermon notes, and you'll read there that it says, the greatest victory, the greatest accomplishment the enemy can accomplish, the greatest thing the enemy can accomplish is to convince us to fight the battle on his terms. And with that in mind, these are 4 questions that I would like you in your prayer time when you're struggling, whether it is in a battle, maybe it's just getting up every morning, is to spend some time and look at these and ask the question. Number 1, am I fighting this battle for the right reasons? Is my heart aligned with God and what he's asking me to do? Am I doing this for the right reasons with the right intentions? Number 2, am I spiritually ready for this battle? And if I'm not, what do I need to do to get spiritually ready for this battle? Is this battle as urgent as it feels? It feels like I got to fight it now, God. Do I? Do I need to continue to wait on you? Is this as urgent as it really feels? And then I think the last question, and probably the most important one, is, am I trying to fight this battle in my power or in yours? Am I trusting you to fight this battle for me, God, or am I trying to do it on my own? And I think if you will spend time in prayer, asking God to open and reveal those answers to those questions to your heart, you'll be amazed at the battles you'll stay out of. You'll be amazed at the way that you will go into battle and into the warfare, spiritual warfare, being prepared. So I'm going to ask you to stand. We're going to have our time of prayer, and then when we're done, we're going to have our invitation time.